All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. I am so excited to be here. We are on the cutting edge. We have the high ground. The creationists, there's some things that are in place that we've never had before, and it's opening up doors. And some of you may not know exactly what I do, so I'm going to show you a little bit. This is kind of a promo. We'll see if it works for you. I do a lot on campus. I ask a lot of questions. So that's a little bit of what I do. I love getting on campus. What's that? Okay, yeah, I love getting on campus. I love talking to the students, and I love asking them questions. And I've got a flyer. Oh, we'll get to that in a little bit, but I'll be speaking on St. Cloud State. I'll be speaking on campus next Tuesday. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to be talking about the hydroplate. We had our very first hydroplate conference in September. And there was 3 PhDs who spoke, and one of them was a professor of aeronautics at the U.S. Air Force Academy. So we've got some big feathers in our hat. And if you can only see one of those talks, I encourage you to watch the Comet talk, because Kevin Lee, he was face-to-face with Dr. Brownlee, who was in charge of the Stardust mission. This was probably 10, 15 years ago. They were trying to get stuff back from a comet. And Kevin Lee said, "You're going to find stuff from the Earth in those comets," paraphrasing. And Dr. Brownlee says, "No, we're going to find stuff from the Oort cloud in those comets." And he was shocked and dismayed to find stuff from the Earth. And then 6 years ago, Kevin, he emailed the same professor, and he reminded him about we talked about the organics and the comet, and I was right about that. But he talks about how NASA, if they try to redirect an asteroid, he said that it'll work if it's a solid rock, but it'll fail if it's a bunch of boulders, which is what the hydroplate would predict. And guess what happened this year? This is August of 9th. NASA accidentally caused amorphous boulder swarm as deadly as Hiroshima during DART mission. So Kevin Lee, he accurately predicted what they'd find in a comet, and he accurately warned them, watch out, if this is a bunch of boulders, you're going to make it worse, and that's what they did. And this is from Science Times. It said the large space rocks have the same speed as the targeted asteroids. They are as dangerous. And then it said that it had unforeseen implications. No, Kevin Lee said this could happen, and they ignored him. So what do we have? We got the PhD guy. We got the U.S. Air Force Academy guy who's banging the hydroplate theory drum. We've got Kevin Lee making accurate predictions, and we've got NASA making catastrophic blunders. And this is really opening up a lot of doors. And so there's 37 rocks now coming at us. Some of them are 22 feet wide, and if they're over 15 feet wide, it could hit with a Hiroshima-sized impact. And so we need to, what I'm trying to do, I was trying to get the hydroplate out there so that Dr. Walt Brown got the credit he deserved before he died. Now I'm trying to get it into the mainstream as fast as I can before NASA makes another catastrophic blunder based on a bad perspective of the past. And, excuse me. And this is a video, this is a clip from the video that...
Anywhere you go, you see these strata lines of rock all around the world, especially like where a road might cut through a mountain or maybe along a mountain. This one is in Utah, and this one is in Pennsylvania. Look at this one in Vermont. These layers are bent 90 degrees. Now wait a minute, you cannot bend rock. It'll simply break. And look at this one. Here's another really interesting feature, also in Pennsylvania. Look at all those severely bent layers. Look at a portion of the Rocky Mountains of Western Canada. Notice that these mountains are not only bent, but they're severely kinked. Look at these interesting layers of rock in Glacier National Park. Each of these layers is roughly as tall as a human. And look what they're doing. These layers are not just bent or kinked. These layers literally bend back over on top of themselves, like an S pattern. How could that have happened over vast amounts of time? The simple and obvious answer is that they can't.
They can't. And that's a clip from the video. They showed that video at the hydroplate conference. And I'd never seen it before because it was called The Horror of the Flood. And I thought, I don't want to know the horrors of the flood. It should be called Evidence for the Flood or Answers for the Flood, because it is the best flood video that I've ever seen. And I contacted him. I had some questions about the gospel, and he answered them properly. And I said, great, I'll take 50 of them. And he said, well, hold on, wait till I get home. I'll give you a 50% discount. And I said, great, I'll take 100. Yeah, this is my Christmas gift for everybody. And I encourage you to, and we've got 20 of them here for the camp, for TCCSA. I encourage you to get them out and hand them out to your pastors, hand them out to your friends, your relatives. And it's a double blessing, because you can say, hey, if you like this video, he's going to speak on February 20th. We're going to have Mike Snavely Day. Like, remember how we had Jerry Bergman Day a while back? We're going to have Mike Snavely Day in February. So you can give, and that's what I did. There was last Tuesday, I was in Wisconsin and I spoke at their creation club, and then there's some old friends that got together, and we haven't seen them in decades. And it's like, man, I'm not missing this. I got up at 6 and I drove back so I could see these friends I haven't seen in a while. And I gave them each one of these. And then I gave them my card with the Mike Snavely date on it. It's like, let's meet again on February 20th. Let's listen to this guy speak live. Let's celebrate this. Let's go out to eat again, and then we can listen to him speak live. And yeah, so I handed out 8 of them there, and I encourage you to, think of your best friend. You never get to see him enough. I encourage them to, hey, let's go, just X out February 20th on your calendar and block that out, and then make it a special day. And because this is, I tell you, it is the best flood video. And my brother, he just emailed me today. He said, yeah, I watched that video. It makes a lot of sense. And again, it's a great way it just destroys millions of years, and it also is a good witnessing tool. And also it has Walt Brown. It has a clip from Walt Brown in here with the hydroplate. So again, it's very, very solid. And when I was up in Wisconsin, the week before I went up there, I called up their college and I asked them, hey, can I get a table and talk to the students? And they asked, well, what do you want to talk about? And I said, I want to talk about a theory that explains Grand Canyon. Because Grand Canyon flows through a plateau instead of around it. And the hydroplate theory explains it, and they said, sure. And so they gave me a table, and I was able to talk to the students. And that hydroplate is opening a lot of doors. And because we have PhD scientists, because we got the U.S. Air Force Academy guy, I'm going into this in the science departments at St. Cloud State. And I'm asking them to take a look at this theory. I don't want to be promoting a theory if it's wrong. Can you take a look at it? And also that 8th edition, that's $270 now. It used to be $30, but now it's out of print. Now it's $270. And the 9th edition, you can download it for free. You can just go into that hydroplate conference, hydroplate.org, and you get to see some of that stuff. But yeah, I was able to talk to the students. And I'm a big proponent of seeing both sides of an issue. This is 1897, this Thomas Chamberlain. He was the first former president of the University of Wisconsin, first head of the geology department at the University of Chicago. So he's well educated. He wrote a famous paper, and he warned researchers not to let one dominant hypothesis dominate their thinking. He said they should always strive or try to have multiple working hypotheses. So then the kids can compare and contrast, they can think critically, they can sharpen their analytical skills. Because if you just have one dominant hypothesis, then people just memorize and conform. And I mentioned this to a St. Cloud State professor a few years ago. And she says, well, that's not how science is done. And I should have asked her, well, how is science done if you don't have multiple working hypotheses? And we'll let Neil deGrasse Tyson take a swing at it.
This is world-renowned astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, a scientist explaining why you and everybody out there shouldn't ask questions. Watch.
There's a list of top-ranking medical professionals. Let's take a look at
I'm talking about, excuse me, medical
Dr. Peter
professionals
McCullough. No, I want to go through what
represent our
happened
consensus.
here. This is the problem with the consensus.
The consensus.
Okay, I just
medical
want,
professional.
I want you to
because the medical is so huge. I can find you an astrophysicist who is sure we've been visited by aliens. That's not the consensus.
The problem was the scientific method died here, and this is the point I want to make. It died a death here, and I need you to help me save it, because Dr. Peter McCullough is the leading cardiologist.
I don't care if titles don't matter here.
But what should matter?
They don't matter.
What should matter?
Is the consensus.
What should?
I'm not interested in medical pedigree. I'm interested in medical consensus, in scientific consensus.
Scientists that were on the ground, that were dealing with patients, were being censored, were being shut down. Their YouTube channels were being shut down. Their LinkedIns were being shut down.
Because the individual scientist does not matter.
So let me get this straight. The scientist doesn't want you to follow the scientific method because it goes against the scientific consensus, even if the consensus was wrong.
Even if the consensus was wrong. And I think that's where we're at. We have scientific consensus instead of having these multiple working hypotheses. And again, I've been in St. Cloud State's science departments 4 times, talking to inviting them to the conference, letting them know that the talks are online, asking them to look at the theory. I've been at the community college, their dean. I was in the dean's office inviting him to take a look at it. I was at the president's office at St. Cloud State inviting them to look at it. And it is puzzling that scientists don't want to know a theory that can answer many scientific problems. And so here's speaking of consensus, go into cosmologystatement.org, and it's an open letter to the scientific community. This is 2004. Says the Big Bang relies on a growing number of hypothetical entities, things that we have never observed, inflation, dark matter, and dark energy. And then it goes on to say that virtually all financial and experimental resources in cosmology are devoted to Big Bang studies. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. All you're going to think about is the Big Bang. They don't let you think about the plasma or the Setterfield. There's other theories out there. But they have the consensus. And that's very dangerous, especially when you can realize how wrong the consensus has been. Anybody ever heard of Ignaz Semmelweis? He's the guy that figured out you got to wash your hands after doing an autopsy before you deliver babies. He figured it out, but it went against the consensus. And the consensus ridiculed him. So what did he do? He figured out that there was 2 wings of the hospital. One wing, they had a high death rate for the moms, and the other one had a low death rate. And the ones that had a high death rate, it was because they were delivered by doctors who just came out of doing autopsies in the morning, and then they deliver the babies. And so then the moms were dying. And he said, you got to wash your hands. Wash your hands with chlorine. Scrub your fingernails. And and we look back at that and just think, no kidding. Of course you need to do that. But that went against the consensus. And the consensus is hard to break. Sometimes science progresses one funeral at a time. And I'm starting to see that in my lifetime. But the people the consensus, they ridiculed him, they rejected him, even though he had the data. His hospital had less than a 1% death rate, while the other hospital had 10 to 15% death rate. And yet they still ridiculed him. And what did they say? They said it was time to stop the nonsense about chlorine hand wash. And we look back at that now and think, what about a bunch of idiots, narrow-minded people who won't adapt to the data? Well, that's what's happening today in astronomy with the hydroplate. We've got a theory that's making accurate predictions. We've got NASA making catastrophic blunders because they don't want to break with the consensus. And now what I'm trying to do is get get both sides on the table so people can think. And I was actually invited into a classroom. Miracles do happen. But a student invited me into a classroom. And so I showed up at the classroom, and I thought I was going to a club, and then I showed up, and there was the professor. And the professor said, I heard you were coming. Come on in. And he made me feel welcome. And he gave me 15 minutes to talk. And I was done talking, and I was talking about, we need to see both sides. We're not getting both sides. And I was done in 10 minutes, and I said, okay, any questions? And then there was 10 minutes of Q&A. And he asked me, well, what would you do if you ran the science department? I said, well, we'd allow all the theories on the table, even if they pointed to God. We're going to allow them all on the table, and then we're going to focus on the ones that make accurate predictions. And we're not going to teach perspectives of the past, millions of years, billions of years. That's not science. We want observation and testing. And then one of the students said, well, do you believe in God or science? The old, right? The old false dichotomy, the either or thing. And I said, I believe in both, right? Because the science in the Bible, they're hand in glove. It fits perfectly. It's the Bible and evolution bang heads because evolution's not science. It's not observation. It's not testing. It's not falsifiable, repeatable. And then one of the students said, well, isn't it a shame that even that question is asked? And I said, yeah, I understand why it's asked, because the students aren't taught that the who's who of science were creationists. People like Newton and Pascal and Faraday and Boyle and Maxwell, all these, the mental giants, they were all creationists. And then I told them about Matthew Murray. You know, he saw in Psalm 8:8 where there was paths, God said there were paths in the sea. He said, well, if God says there's paths in the sea, I'm going to find them. And he found the ocean currents. Saves the shipping industry billions of dollars. And I told him about George Washington Carver, the peanut guy. He had 10 minutes to speak in front of Congress about the importance of the peanut in the peanut in the Southern economy. And he was so interesting, they let him go for 2 hours. And they finally said, how did you learn so much about the peanut? And he said, an old book. And they said, what old book? And he said, the Bible. And they said, the Bible told you about the peanut? And he goes, no, 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 the Bible told me about the one who made the peanut. I asked him what to do with it. And I told the students, just think if we had that freedom to think, you know, honor our creator with our technology and where we could go. But right now, everybody's forced to think inside this government-imposed box. Blind chance, random collisions of atoms, that's all you got for the perspective of the past. And I'm trying to change that before NASA makes another catastrophic blunder. But this is the Semmelweis reflex. Long-held ideas can remain entrenched despite potent evidence to the contrary, and people can and do persecute those who challenge the consensus, even when the consensus is wrong. Yeah, even when the consensus is wrong, they're still going to, and you see it with evolution. Excuse me. And you see with evolution, now we've got this continuous environmental tracking that you've heard about, and evolution's fallen apart. And so is the Big Bang. They just don't have anything to replace it besides God. And yeah, and so, but anyhow, so we had this poster up at St. Cloud State. We were promoting the online conference. You know, it was going to be there. It was just answers to scientific problems, like the origin of Grand Canyon, nerves in dinosaur bones, fusing past iron, plateau formation, cubanite and comets, frozen mammoths standing up, peanut-shaped asteroids, rounded boulders in Comet 67P, rock from the Earth on the Moon, carbon-14 and fossils, diamonds and coal, and shells on Mount Everest. These are hard things for an evolutionist to answer. And that was the poster that was hanging up. And somebody stole it. Yeah, and so we put it up again, and somebody stole it again. They risked their academic or professional career to do something dishonest like that. They know who did it, but they won't tell us who, if it was a student, a faculty, or a staff member. And I asked the LGBT people, I said, is this offensive? And they said, no, it's not offensive. And so who would steal it? And I can speculate, you know, if I don't know who did it, but my guess is it's somebody who understands that if this theory answers all those problems, we can throw the Big Bang on the scrap heap of history where it belongs. And they don't want that to happen. So anyhow, they stole it, and I don't like censorship. I don't know if that made that clear or not. And so, so we did it at our local club. We did that same talk at the local club the next month. And our church printed out 50 of these flyers that we plastered all over St. Cloud State. And it said, see what a poster thief wants to censor at SCSU, hydroplate.org. And then we invited them. And then they started to, and then after the date, I took the date, after it was done, I took the date off and I left the flyers up there because that's good information. And then they started to steal the flyers. And because they're censoring again, we're going to do it right on campus. We got the theater at St. Cloud State in the Atwood building, and it's going to be a week from tonight, from 8 until 9, and I'm inviting all the students. I'm inviting, oh yeah, and I also had a table at St. Cloud State that said, see what a poster thief wants censored at St. Cloud State. Big white letters and so then the students came and they were asking me. You know, it was pretty slow up until then, and that's actually how one of the students invited me into class. But anyhow, this is again, it's hanging up. Another one, and I talked to the people in Atwood. I say, can you put a warning up there? Put there, stealing posters is theft and will be dealt with accordingly. And they said, no, that's too offensive a language. We can't put that up there. And so I put it up there myself. I taped it on the bottom. I said, stealing posters is theft and violates the student and employee handbook, you know, code of conduct, so that they understand it. And so, I don't know, but that's what's happening at St. Cloud State. And again, we're trying to, I had a sign one time too. It said, will SCSU lead us out of the dark ages of blind chance and random collisions of atoms? And the president goes walking by and her administrator's there, and the administrator and I get along pretty well. We've had some good talks. And he goes, yeah, we're leading them out of the dark age, we're teaching them how to think. And I said, you're not teaching them how to think in the science class. You're forcing them to think a certain way. And so anyhow, it'll be interesting to see who shows up a week from tonight. But yeah, we just do what we can. Get you up to speed on what's been happening in my ministry. I got a new website called solidifyyourfaith.weebly.com. It used to be .webs, but that went away. So now it's .weebly.com. And my brother asked me, what does Weebly mean? And I said, it means I'm cheap. You know, it's a free website. The less I spend on that, the more I have to do what God wants me to do. And I was invited out to Pennsylvania to do a Christian apologetics seminar. And on the way out there, I got, somebody from Wisconsin asked me, you know, can you do a creation science revival? We'll give you 3 talks on Sunday plus Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I said, I'd love to, but I'll be in, I'll be in Pennsylvania that weekend. I can do it the weekend before. And he said, sure. And I said, how about we do a creation Sunday, and then a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll have a revival of truth, of all the information that's been censored these last few years. You know, because creationists, we've been getting censored for decades. But now we're starting to see other people getting censored these last few years. And he said, yeah, go ahead. And so Monday we took a look behind the vaccine curtain, where you look at vaccine experts testifying under oath. Tuesday we looked at the COVID corruption, so hopefully we can learn from that, and that never happens again. And then Wednesday we looked at what the tyrants are trying to put in place to control us, like digital currency, climate credits, vaccine passports, social credit scores, so we can at least be aware of what's coming down the pike. And then for a good bonus I put in, should I vaccinate my baby? But yeah, and then they had a watch group. They had a watchdog group in that town that kept an eye on the school board, the city council, and the health department, and the county board. And a lot of those people came to those talks. And so those talks, there's a DVD over there for a donation of any amount, but they're also on YouTube. You can, or not YouTube, YouTube censors it. It's on Rumble. Go into Revival of Truth on Rumble, and you can see all those talks. And I was invited out to Rocky Mountain Creation Fellowship out in Denver. And I was interviewed on Real Science Radio. I don't know if you guys have listened to Real Science Radio. It's my favorite website. They have so much information there, and it's so entertaining. And they interviewed me, and they wanted to interview me about, should I vaccinate my baby? And so we put it up. It was broadcast on KLTT on 50,000 watts out of Denver. And then YouTube censored it. And he emailed me, Fred emailed me and said that YouTube censored the video. And I said, hey, welcome to the party. More people will probably see it now that it's censored than if it wasn't censored, and that's exactly what happened. So they have a Rumble channel now. If you want to see it, you go into Rumble, and excuse me. And then and Real Science Radio, it's really good. Bob Enyart, somebody called me the Bob Enyart of St. Cloud last month, and I was so proud of myself. The Bob Enyart of St. Cloud, that's something to strive for. But because Bob, he's been an example. He goes way out on the limb. And it's like, well, Bob can go way out there. I can go out this far. And what did Bob do? He had one of his questions submitted to a really prestigious scientific conference out in Germany. You know, he was a science journalist, and he submitted his question, and they picked it. And normally they say, you know how if they find water on a planet, they'll say, oh, life could have originated there. And what Bob points out is, no, water's an enemy of life. It breaks things apart faster than it gets put together. And that question gets asked, and then the person tries to tap dance around it and answer a different question, but he pulls her back. So I'll let you listen to this.
This is for Dr. Wojtek, for Mary. It is from Bob, an independent science reporter. And the question is, Rather than an asset, isn't water the enemy of prebiotic molecules? It's the universal solvent, and outside of a living organism, water dissolves life's building blocks like amino acids, sugars like RNA and DNA, various kinds of carbohydrates and other polymers. Shouldn't this chemical challenge be more openly acknowledged in astrobiology? I guess this assumes it's not acknowledged, but what do you say?
I think it's acknowledged. I'm not exactly, I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have is understanding the evolution from simple compounds that can be made abiotically towards more organized and more highly functional biomolecules that are important for life. So I guess I don't understand.
And so water is a challenge, how these molecules survive.
Because of water? Sorry, yes. I guess I didn't get it.
Well, I think the question is, it posits that water is a challenge for prebiotic evolution, that because it attacks the various molecules involved.
So, in some of the prebiotic, this is something that people think about. Hydration and dehydration reactions are really important in prebiotic chemistry. And so postulating that...
So she tap dances around the question, but basically what we need to understand is life needs water to live, right? But life can't start in water. The water's going to break apart the molecules faster than they get put together. And that's the point that we need to get, and NASA, and Bob says he's never seen that in any of the literature, you know, and so anyhow. But again, I go out at different colleges. This is where I've been this year. How did we get here? Creation, evolution, and intelligent design. And this is at a community college up north, and creation actually won. It was 16-6 when it was all said and done. Creation won. And I asked the one guy, he was checked under creation, and I said, why did you check under creation? And he said, well, that's where everyone else is putting it. Huh? Yeah, there's 15 to 20% on either side. You're never going to change their mind. But it's the 60 to 70% in the middle that'll go wherever the current's the strongest. So let's make creation the strong current. And then we did this here. This was Northwestern. They did a real good job of teaching creation. This is St. Cloud State. It was 43 to 39. I thought it was going to be a landslide, but it wasn't. And this is after how many decades and billions of dollars of brainwashing people of only allowing one perspective in the classroom. This is over at Bethel, and that was 39 to 3. And then, let's see. This is at community college at St. Cloud State, and creation is winning at these government institutions, and I find that very encouraging. It was 49 to 21 at a community college. This is when I was out in Altoona, Pennsylvania. This is Penn State's campus, and it was 17 to 13. So evolution won, but it's not the landslide that you would think it would be. And then I went to the University of Illinois, Chicago with just my notebook and went up to students and asked them, you know, how did we get here? And it was pretty even. 10 creation, 18 evolution, 12 didn't know, 9 said both. So they're not running away with it like you would think. And this was an event in St. Cloud where the business people came, or there's a lot of Christians that were invited to this. And so what am I going to ask the Christians? It's like, hey, when did dinosaurs live? Was it millions of years ago or thousands of years ago? And it was 81 to 51 millions of years, which tells me that we are doing a poor job of giving people a biblical perspective of dinosaurs. You know, they're still buying the atheistic perspective of millions of years. And I spoke at Redeemer Christian Academy today, and I gave them their baloney detector. You lose a baloney detector. When you hear millions or billions of years, that's when the baloney detector should go off, because that's not true. Excuse me. All right, so let's jump into God's clues real quick. Let's think like a detective. This is the crime scene out in Colorado. That's where we were camping, and we put all our food in the trunk. And we woke up the next morning, and guess what we had on our trunk? We had some paw prints. You know, did that just randomly happen with drops from rain or whatever? No, I think there was a bear, and he bit our bumper, and he bit our soap on the table. And then just last year in our backyard, there was some scratches on a tree, and there were some scratches on a pillow and puncture marks. And it's like, well, we don't really know what happened, but if we had a picture, now we know what happened. Yeah, there's a picture tells you exactly what happened, right? And I submit to you today that the Bible is the picture of the universe. This is how God did it, and it fits perfectly. And when we go back to the, did dinosaurs live millions or thousands of years ago? What does the evidence? What are some of God's clues? Well, God's gave us clues. There's, anybody ever been to Grand Canyon? Those layers don't just end there. They go all around the continent. And not only do they go around the continent, they go all the way around the world. There's worldwide layers of sedimentary rock that can't be laid down by local floods. I don't care how many there are. These are one big worldwide flood. And then they find dinosaur footprints on every continent. And it's like, how does that happen? Are your footprints turning to stone? Something happens very special all around the world that preserved these footprints. And I went down to Glen Rose, Texas. There was a big flood that ripped off a layer of limestone and a layer of bedrock, and there was dinosaur footprints. And the controversial part about this is there was human footprints at that time too. So I encourage people to go into footprints in stone, overwhelming evidence for dinosaurs and man tracks together. And I was able to interview somebody who found dinosaur and human footprints together. His name's Carl Baugh. I interviewed him at the Grace Conference this conference.
I was completing the master's in archaeology and was assigned by my mentor to direct an original excavation. And in the process of doing that, after removing the limestone layer, discovered a trail of dinosaur footprints, 19 altogether, 19 successive dinosaur footprints. Removed more limestone, and 18 inches from one of those dinosaur footprints, I discovered a 16-inch human footprint. Genuine in every detail. The great toe, which is unique to man, second, third, fourth little toe, metatarsal arch, the ball section of the foot, the medial section, which includes the interior ball section of the foot, and the lateral with a bulge. All of that is unique to mankind. And continued to excavate and discovered 3 more. So a series of left, right, human footprints among dinosaur footprints. I called the press. They flew down by helicopter. The next morning, I got on the plane at DFW to go back to St. Louis, and headlines in the newspaper stated, "Tracks step on evolution."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then the battle began.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the battle began. The evolutionists don't like to when you find stuff that really destroys their theory. And you listen to Don Patton. He talks about how they broke one of their footprints with a crowbar. There's reports of that. But Carl Baugh, he was an old earth creationist. And I asked him, what was it like? And this is
So
what he said.
I was a progressive old age creationist, but it really is in the same camp, unfortunately. So this destroyed my paradigm completely. I didn't sleep for 4 days and nights. And then I went back to St. Louis, and the press started calling and took the news, the controversy worldwide. And I'd like to say that every honest person has identified with it. They too have to go through a catharsis, a complete change of mindset in order to accept this. And even some very good creationists are hesitant to accept this, right, because the evolutionists have targeted everything we do, yep, and of course propagandized, right, every false idea they, right, can, but that's fine. Right. We would expect that, yep, because this destroys their religion.
It does. It does.
But it supports the true religion and the true God, and the Bible as being the Word of God.
Amen. And so there's somebody who found a human footprint next to the dinosaur footprint, and a lot of creation organizations say don't talk about it. Well, I'm just here to say, hey, there's information, go search it out for yourself. And listen to people who've been there. There's a lot of people who have a lot of opinions that have never been there. And again, check out Carl Baugh and Don Patton. And what are they finding? Did dinosaurs live millions of years ago? No. They found blood cells in the dinosaur bone. And look at this, Schweitzer's dangerous discovery. What's dangerous about blood cells in the dinosaur bone? It's not dangerous, unless you get your power and prestige and funding from evolution being true. And this is what it says. He goes, do you realize you got red blood cells in that bone? She goes, I just got goosebumps because everyone knows these things don't last 65 million years. Everyone knows that. And then she showed it to her boss. And when Schweitzer showed Horner the slide, she recalls Jack said, prove to me they're not red blood cells. He's not real excited about finding something that can't be millions of years old and something that's supposed to be millions of years old. And so he was not excited about it. They found bone cells in the dinosaur Triceratops horn. This guy, Mark Armitage, he got it published in Acta Histochemica, did something nobody's ever done, and what happened to him? You think he got a raise? What do you think happened? He got fired. Exactly right. He kicked the sacred cow, and they fired him. And so he sued him for wrongful termination, and he won. They shouldn't have fired him, but he's not teaching there anymore. And Jerry Bergman, he's got 3 volumes of it, people being persecuted. But Mark Armitage, now he's finding dinosaur nerves in dinosaur bones. And nerves can't last millions of years. And yeah, Julie, you've seen this. Where's the nerve on that picture? Well, you can't see it unless you hit it with UV light. And then it glows. And then you zoom in on it, and it becomes more and more beautiful. The more you zoom in on what God made, it's just the more intricate it is. And so his stuff is on the microscopy today. And they found carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. And also, Bob Enyart, he called up Jack Horner and said, I'll give you $20,000 if you carbon date that bone. And Jack won't do it. He said, well, we wouldn't expect to find carbon-14 in here because the bone's too old. And Bob says, yeah, I know, but we wouldn't expect to find blood cells in there either. And they wouldn't do it. But other people did, and they found dates of 22,000 to 39,000, not millions of years. But those people were even censored at the symposium. And so that's what happens. You know, when you kick the sacred cow, they're going to try and discredit you, or they're going to try and erase it from public view. And okay, that's enough of the dinosaurs. Let's move on to the Fibonacci sequence. I believe this is God's fingerprints. No matter where you look, you see this curve.
In the Fibonacci sequence, the first 2 numbers are 0 and 1, and each following number is the sum of the previous 2 numbers. As the sequence climbs, the ratio of 2 of its higher values nears the golden ratio, or phi. These special numbers often occur in nature, like in the spirals on a sunflower. The same patterns show up in the circular layers of a pine cone or pineapple, and in clusters of conifer needles. So, what does all this mean? Well, evolution can't explain the development of mathematical laws, but the Bible can. Scripture solves this mystery by pointing us to the truth of the intelligent Creator. God created all things, both visible and invisible, like math.
Like math. And it's even in your hand. You didn't know this, did you?
Finger bone lengths follow the proportions of the Fibonacci number sequence. The sum of the smallest 2 segments of a finger equals the length of the third, and the sum of the second and third equals the length of the 4th bone. Your hand is a mobile golden spiral, perfectly balancing strength and dexterity.
And you see that curve wherever you look. From the smallest DNA, you see that curve, to horns and shells and spider webs, you got that same curve. Even hurricanes have that same curve. And the farthest galaxy has that same curve. I mean, what are the chances of that? You know, I'm thinking that's God's fingerprints. It says, hey guys, look at me. I'm really small and I'm really big. Here I am. And then they also have the fractals.
The Mandelbrot set of numbers reveals a secret code that went undiscovered for thousands of years. While mathematicians can plot this set by hand, today's computers show with great precision that beauty is built into numbers. And when you take a closer look at the Mandelbrot set, you see the pattern goes on without end. This is an example of a fractal, a type of structure that repeats infinitely on smaller and smaller scales. Snowflakes have a fractal quality. Why is this? The laws of nature responsible for snowflake formation are mathematical because they stem from the mind of God. Fractals occur both in math, which is abstract, not made of atoms, and the physical world, which is made of atoms, because they have the same designer. Lightning branches occur in a fractal pattern, and so does broccoli. If the universe was formed by chance, why would nature follow mathematical rules?
Yeah, exactly. And this is Jason Lyle does a really good talk on this. The image on the left, that's a mathematical formula. The image on the right, that's a fern. The same thing with that's a galaxy. The same thing on that one, same thing there. So the mathematical formula, it shows up in nature. And DNA is an incredible clue for us. Because the DNA, it says that each of our 100,000, we have 100 trillion cells, 3 billion DNA letters. And it says about 1 million DNA letters are damaged in a cell on a good day. So there's a DNA repair system. So the question is, well, did DNA come about first or the repair system come about first? You know, they had to be fully formed, fully functional. And even like chirality, that's another huge clue, the origin of the chirality problem. This is because our proteins, when we're alive, they're all left-handed. And the proteins, they're not, like our hands are not mirror image, or they're not identical. They're mirror images of each other. That's the same thing with chirality. And this guy is a pretty sharp guy, and he says, evolution hopes you don't know chemistry, the problem with chirality. Because he says, how can random chance natural processes create proteins with thousands of left-handed molecules? Because that's all that there is in life. It's all left-handed. And then when you die, it goes back to a 50-50 mix. And then also create DNA with billions of right-handed molecules. And he said, the reality of chirality, more than any other evidence, did more to convince me than the reality of an all-powerful creator. And so there's just some amazing clues. If you know what's out there, it just screams God. And then we've talked about the workhorse of the cell. This is the kinesin, happening 1 trillion times over in your body.
Cells are full of specialized components that perform functions vital to their existence. But how do these components get to the right locations inside the cell to perform their functions? For larger components, a transportation system is needed. Meet the kinesin. Masterpieces of microengineering, kinesins are miniature motorized machines that carry cargo from one part of the cell to another, walking along self-assembling highways called microtubules.
Yeah, how does that happen by chance random processes? That is an incredible design. I saw that, and it's like, well, how do the microtubules know where to go? And my son saw it, it's like, well, where do they get the energy to move? And that brings us to ATP synthase.
It's been called one of the wonders of the molecular world, an amazing nanoscale machine. ATP synthase is a high-tech micromolecular power generator inside the cells of your body. It generates adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, an energy molecule that provides fuel that every one of your cells needs to function. Without this fuel, your cells will cease operation, and so will you.
So you need it to live. So how did you live before it evolved? Now, it had to be fully formed, fully functional. And look at the design in this.
The ATP synthase machine has many parts we recognize from human-designed technology. A rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, and other basic components of a rotary engine. The ATP synthase is one of thousands of elegantly designed molecular machines inside your cells that make your life and all known life possible. ATP synthase, an example of intelligent design.
Yeah, I would say that's intelligently designed. And yet in the biology class, they can't talk about a designer. It's all got to be chance random processes, which is really hurting science. Okay, and then what came first, the heart or blood cells? I asked at a museum, in the Mastodon Museum in St. Louis, I asked the person who was working there, what came first, the heart or blood cells? And they said, blood cells. And I said, what good are blood cells without a heart? And they said, the heart. I said, well, what good's a heart without blood cells? And I said, I'll even give it to you. In all these supposedly billions of years in this huge universe, you got the first heart with the first blood cells. What good are they without lungs? Or a digestive system? You know, or a nervous system? Fred Williams has a son. He was at college in Colorado, and he'd meet atheists, and he'd ask him, well, how did vital organs evolve? You know, vital organs, we can't live without them. How did we live before they evolved? And so again, it had to be fully formed, fully functional right from the get-go. Your belly button is a huge clue. There was one time when you were living in fluid, and then you were born, and now you had to live in the air. And I don't know if you remember Dr. Cazel's talk, You've Come a Long Way, Baby, but he talks about all the valves that have to slam for you to live, and it's just an incredible design. Even blood clotting, you know, how did that happen? You know, if it clots too soon, you're going to die, and if it doesn't clot at all, you're going to bleed to death. And so there's, David Reeves does a really good job on this. There's 100 different cascading effects that have to happen in the perfect order. Again, that's a huge clue. And I think the butterfly is just an incredible clue for a creationist. Whenever I see a monarch, I just stop and I watch and I just praise the glory of God, because it started as an egg, and then it turns into this walking mouth, you know, and walking stomach. The caterpillar, all it does is eat. It can't reproduce. And then it turns into a chrysalis, and it dissolves itself and comes out as a butterfly. And how does that happen? By step-by-step chance random processes. And it had to get all the way through or it's going to be dead. And so, yeah, and the thing about the butterflies is there's 4 generations from Mexico to get here. And then they all fly back down to Mexico. They've never been there before. Just the butterfly is just an amazing thing. And then the bumblebees, it's buzz pollination. You'll enjoy this one.
Orpheum flowers don't contain nectar. The payment they provide is pollen. But strangely, they keep it locked up. Special twisted stamens stop it being stolen by visiting insects. All, that is, except one. The female carpenter bee. Only she has the key. Let me show you what the bee has to do using these tuning forks here. When the bee lands on the flower, it changes the rate at which it beats its wings to just the right frequency. From this note to this one. Middle C. And it's these vibrations that are the key, unlocking the stamens, which open up at the top here and just shower the bee with pollen. Ah, look at that. Look at the amount of yellow pollen on there. Fantastic. Now watch the bee do the same, hitting the middle C note with the beat of its wings and unlocking the pollen. No other insect does this. It's incredible, isn't it? One single species of flower, one particular type of bee have evolved together to give this intimate partnership.
You catch that? They evolved together. Yeah, they just will not give the creator the credit he deserves. But again, middle C is like, oh my, what an incredible designer we've got. And then we've got, what do you think has a tail like a beaver, bill like a duck, fur like an otter, spur like a rooster, webbed toes like a water bird, poison glands like reptiles, hollow spurs like a viper tooth, lays eggs like a bird, echolocates like a dolphin, sonar like whales, short legs like reptiles, nest like a bird. It's the platypus. That's an incredible clue. Mr. Evolutionist, where did that come from? Man, it came from everything, you know? And then these are clues that point to the hydroplate. You know, why did the river flow through the plateau to make Grand Canyon instead of around it? And how did that funnel form up there? And then there's also these potholes on a 2,000-foot cliff 4 miles from the river. How in the world does that happen? And Dr. Brown talks about it. And then there's this 5 to 10 ton rock that got lifted up into sedimentary rock. It came from the bottom right, and it got lifted up into the sedimentary rock. These are clues that point strongly to the hydroplate. And how do you get rounded boulders in Comet 67P? Because if things break together in space, they're going to have jagged edges. The only way you get rounded boulders is if it went through a fast flow of water before they got shot up there, which is what the hydroplate says. And then you got peanut-shaped asteroids. Now this is their words, Aviation Week and Space Technology. It's a major mystery how 2 objects, each the size of skyscrapers, could collide without blowing each other to smithereens. This is especially puzzling in a region of the solar system where gravitational forces would normally involve collision speeds of 4,500 miles an hour. That's a big clue. They can't answer it, but the hydroplate does. And why is the near side of the moon pounded? Why are there so many lava flows on the near side and not the far side? Again, the hydroplate can explain that. And why is the Earth's oldest rock found on the moon? How did it get there? And then it goes on to say that it crystallized about 20 kilometers beneath Earth's surface, which is exactly what the hydroplate would say. So there's a lot of clues that are pointing to the hydroplate. And then let's jump back into the I. your eye. That's an amazing technological feat. And this is Bob Enyart. He had a challenge to PZ Meyer. You notice on the top right where that muscle goes through that sling? He says, hey, PZ, how did that happen over evolution? Chance random processes. In both eyes, they got the same thing. And then the humans have over 250 million photoreceptors and about 120 million rods and 6 million cones in each eye. How'd you like to wire that thing? And it just comes out and they meet right in the middle. It's just an amazing, amazing design. And yet it's miraculous, I think. And yet the evolutionists recognize that the eye must have arisen independently at least 30 times. You know, it just happened. Then bioluminescence, the same thing. It must have arisen at least 40 to 50 times separately. These are miraculous. And then dolphins' sonar, still better than man's. And it says dolphins and bats both have complex echolocation systems. They're each built by about 200 genes that are incredibly similar in both species. But they didn't have a common ancestor. I'm thinking God had a toolbox for echolocation. It's like, I'll throw it into the bat, I'll throw it into the dolphin. That's about the only way it makes sense. And speaking of bats and echolocation, has anybody ever heard of Daniel Kish? It is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of amazing things over 10 years, but Daniel Kish, when he was 9 months old, he had cancer and he lost an eye. Then when he was 13 months old, he lost the other eye. So now he's blind. And he just started to click with his tongue. And then his brain learned how to process those sound waves. And so now they'll put him in a park and he'll be oh, there's a tree, click, he's clicking away. And he'll be able to, it's like, this seems like a court, and the basketball court the hoop is right, boom, and he'll hit it the first time. Because he can process those sound waves with his brain. And I'm just thinking, how much does God love us? A little toddler, he showed him how to see without his eyes. You know, what else has God designed into us? And yeah, I'll let you listen to his own story.
As a kid, I was raised to think of myself as pretty unremarkable. My parents, their emphasis, their regard for me was you're a kid like any other kid.
He got his first bicycle at the age of 6.
I learned to click like a maniac, and I learned to ride around the neighborhood. And if I ran into a pole, my parents just didn't make a big deal out of it. Running into a pole is a drag, but never being allowed to run into a pole is a disaster.
Riding a bike blind has become a kind of stunt he does to raise awareness that the brain can adapt and that people can do far more than they realize.
Years ago, it was just unheard of. So if you don't close your eyes for just a moment, okay, and you're going to learn a bit of flash sonar. Now you have scientists studying it, you have instructors wanting to learn it, you have instructors wanting to teach it, you have blind people wanting to learn it. Being able to navigate comfortably in any environment, under any circumstances, nothing can be more fundamental to freedom than being able to do that.
Isn't that amazing? Wow. Just amazing how much God loves him. And I was able to contact him. I emailed him. He's got this thing called Visioneers. It's over in Europe. And I contacted him and I said, would you like to be interviewed for Real Science Radio? And he got back to me and he said, sure, I'll be interviewed. And I said, can we interview your parents too? I'd love to hear the thought process of getting your blind kid a bicycle. And he said that they're kind of microphone shy, so it was, but he did get interviewed, rsr.org. So it's rsr.org/Batman, and you'll be able to listen to him talk about this amazing, amazing, what God's allowed him to do, how he's showing people out, I mean, he's showing people how to overcome their blindness. And it's just incredible. And I have so much respect for his parents. They didn't make it easy on him. You know, you notice how he said it's a disaster, it's a drag running into a pole. but it's a disaster not being allowed to run into a pole. You know, and so they allowed him to overcome the challenges, and now he's, you know, they just expected you're going to live like everyone else. And so I think that we may be doing a disservice to our kids by making things easy. I think they get confidence by overcoming things, and I think we need to let them overcome things. And so anyhow, but let's see, we're almost ready to wind down here. Yeah, we got some DVDs on the side. Also, yeah, there's some, if you're looking for Christmas, I didn't bring it all in, didn't have a cart. But if you're looking for Christmas gifts, again, this Mike Snavely, The Horrors of the Flood. Don't let the title scare you. Just think of it as evidence for the flood, or answers to the flood. And again, your pastor should get this, your friends, your relatives, and then invite them out, a double blessing. Come out to Mike Snavely. Listen to him live. I'll bring you out to eat, and then we're going to go listen to him talk. So that's there, and then I've also got some videos on the side there for anything, donation of any amount. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes?
You used the term hydroplane a number of times.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do some recreation science flood research, but I've not heard the term hydroplane. You didn't define that term during your lecture. Could you do that now?
I can make an attempt at it.
So you connected it to asteroid formation as well?
Yeah, yeah.
If you could
yeah.
include that in your definition and description, it would be appreciated.
Okay. The hydroplane was developed by Dr. Walt Brown. He's an Army Ranger, paratrooper, MIT, PhD from, mechanical engineering. And most theories, they take a look at the effect and try and figure out what caused it. They know what the effect is, but they really don't know the cause. This is different. He sets up the cause with one assumption. Just one assumption, then he lets the laws of physics go at it, and then that explains what we see in the world around us. And his one assumption is half of the ocean was inside the Earth at one time. How it got there is not part of the theory. So just think of the Earth as a big apple, and the skin is 60 miles thick made of granite, and then there's a layer of water about a mile thick, and then underneath that there's basalt. And the granite and basalt are touching each other at certain places around the Earth. Okay, that's his one assumption. And then he lets the laws of physics go at it. You got the moon tugging on the crust. And back then, the crust wasn't broken into plates like it is today. It was just the crust. So it's going to stretch and compress twice a day. It's going to generate heat. Heat goes into the water. Water gets hotter and hotter and hotter. It wants to boil, but it can't because there's no room to expand. And then at 705 degrees and 3,200 psi, it becomes supercritical water. They know about it. It's not very well known, but they've known about it for 100 years. Where it's not really water and it's not really steam, but whatever it is, it dissolves things like crazy. So now it's dissolving the mantle above, or the granite above, and the basalt below, and mixing stuff together and making stuff like limestone and silica and quartz and salts in the subterranean chamber. And then eventually the crust gets weak enough where it cracks. As more and more pressure, Walt Brown thinks it's probably 372,000 psi in that water. And then when it just cracks, it's going to rip around the Earth in two directions, that crack does, and like a seam on the baseball, and then it cracks and then it comes together again. And then the water just erupts out of there with tremendous force. And that's how it could rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And people say, well, if that happened on the Earth, wouldn't it leave a mark? And the mark, yeah, it did. It's the mid-oceanic ridge. That's a 46,000-mile mountain range that goes around the bottoms of the oceans. And that's where the water was shooting up. So now you got two cliffs 60 miles high, and they're crumbling into this supersonic water flowing up. Because on Earth, you can only have a cliff 5 miles high, or it's going to crumble. Now these are 60 miles high. So that's where all this granite and basalt, this sedimentary rock. I always wondered, where did all this sediment come from for the sedimentary rock? Well, it was getting eroded away from from the fountains. Okay, and then now that you got the cliffs getting wider and wider and wider, well, pretty soon there's nothing pushing down on the mid-Atlantic ridge, and it bulges. So now you got North America and South America sliding to the west, Africa and Europe sliding to the east, and they keep going until they hit resistance, and then they buckle up and form mountains. And so now you got a big mass on a small base, and that sinks in. Well, if something sinks in, something's got to rise up, and that's how the plateaus form. They really can't explain how a plateau forms in the Colorado anyway. And so then the same thing, and with the mid-oceanic ridge rising up everywhere, something has to sink in, and that's the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean sunk in, and that's why you get the ring of fire. That's why you got all those volcanoes down there, and there's a lot of molten, and that's why you got the trenches in the Pacific. And so then all the water gushes off the continents, which was, the water was covering the continents. Now it gushes off, cuts those submarine canyons, and then the continents sink down and the oceans rise up and fill that in. And then again, some of the stuff was going with such tremendous force that it escaped our gravitational pull. And it just kept on going. And that's where the the theory started with 10 kilometers thick and then 10 miles thick and now 60 miles thick, because he keeps adding stuff. He thinks that the trans-Neptune objects came from inside the Earth. He thinks that, I think Pluto could even be formed that way. And so it's an interesting theory. It may not be right on every detail, but I think the framework is very, very solid and very robust because it makes accurate predictions. And so that's my 5-minute attempt at explaining the hydroplate. But I encourage you, and it's been around for decades. That's what irritates me the most. How come we weren't banging this drum for the last 40 years? We'd have more scientific clout than we'd know what to do with, because it seems like 5 or 10 years we got an accurate prediction that's just astounding. And so, again, I can't do anything about the past, but I can do something about the future. And so I'm trying, and we got our very first hydroplate conference online. It's never happened in the history of the world. And
this is a conference up at St. Cloud State?
No, this was online. It was an online conference, hydroplate.org. You're going to be able to see all the talks. And one of the talks is problems with plate tectonics, problems with models, earthquakes, comets. Yeah, hydroplate.org. There's also a YouTube channel with the hydroplate channel. Brian Nickel does a great job for explaining it visually, especially the Grand Canyon one. It's just amazing. But yeah, that's the theory that I think gives us the proper perspective of the past, and it's making accurate predictions. And I'm really, 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 really trying to get the professors to take a look at it and the students to take a look at it, because they should have competing hypotheses. They shouldn't just be banging the big bang drum down people's throat. There should be another perspective. And I think this is the theory that I think has the potential to throw the big bang on the trash heap of history. So again, it's the hydroplate. rsr.org/HPT is a good one too, where you can hear, and what colored in the details for me is when I listened to Walt Brown Week on Real Science Radio, rsr.org, Walt Brown Week. He explained it all, and it's like, wow. And I've never seen the world the same again, or the solar system. And so I encourage you to go into RSR, and support them if you can, and Real Science Radio. And then you can get the 9th edition for free. Download it. Go into rsr.org/HPT, scroll down to the book, hit 9th edition, and get it. And I think everybody should have that, so we don't have to depend on the internet, because that could be taken down like that. So that's the hydroplate in a nutshell. Any other questions? That's good. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes?
Mind if I offer you a free piece of marketing advice?
Free piece of marketing advice? Yeah, I'll take a free piece.
So Target used to have red backgrounds with white lettering, like
Yeah.
the Target symbol and all that.
Yeah.
And they actually did a study. They found that white backgrounds with the red lettering laid over it
Yeah.
actually helps customers see it from farther away. So your posters that you're hanging up at St. Cloud,
Yeah.
they have red background with white lettering over that. Yep, exactly that. But
Yeah.
students will be able to see the lettering a lot farther away if you have red lettering in the right background.
Okay. Which one will they see first, a red poster or a white poster?
They will see a white poster with red lettering.
Will they? Okay. Thank you.
That right there.
Thank you.
That is a lot better.
Yeah, I didn't do that one. Yeah, we had a marketing genius for that. But yeah, you guys should all road trip up to St. Cloud State. It's going to be a lot of fun next Tuesday. Yes?
I think the website, the TCCSA website, says that it's in Ashland, Wisconsin.
Yeah, I saw that. I emailed somebody. Did that get changed? I emailed somebody to get it changed. It must not have got changed. It's at St. Cloud State.
I was like, I saw SCSU, I'm like, I bet you that's St. Cloud State.
Yeah.
Is there something with those initials?
Yeah. Did that get, I don't know, somebody can go in there now. I don't know if it got changed or not. I noticed that a few days ago and I tried to change it, but I'm not sure if it got. But yeah, it's going to be at St. Cloud State. It's in the theater. It's my favorite room. And we haven't had a Grace Campus event in a while. They make it harder and harder. So we're going to do it again. Oh, and then once we got the room, they froze our account. They froze our club. They said, you're 2 students short of having a valid club. But then our president found 2 more students, so now we're up and flying again. So we're going to go in there with, and we're just saying, you just tolerate this. That's what our attitude is. We want a diversity of thought in the science class. And I've talked to the president about that, because they're losing students hand over fist, even before COVID. And I said, you might be able to attract and retain more students if you allowed a diversity of thought in the science class, like intelligent design and creation. Yes?
You had several examples of irreducible complexity, but you never used that term. That seems to be the popular term. Is there a reason why you weren't using it when you used examples that are precisely that concept?
Yeah, I'm not that bright, I guess. That's a irreducible complexity. I like that. I like what Bob Enyart calls it. He calls it sublime sophistication. You know? Yeah, I guess I'm not a technical guy. I don't know. That's a good question. Irreducible complexity, that's good. But you can write a real complex program, you know? And just because it's complex doesn't mean it's good. It could be like 4 pages long that does one thing. That's complex. But sophisticated would be a real short program that can do a multiple of things. And that's what God's done with our DNA. There's sophistication built in. It's not complexity, it's sophisticated. And that's what Bob Enyart calls it. He's one of my heroes. All right, Q&A is kind of fun. Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
With all the work that you've done on campuses, first off, thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Have you seen any, like, obviously it's hard to change a whole organization like that. Have you seen any, like, personal people, like, thinking deeper about these topics?
Well, yeah. He thanked me for being on campus. Yeah, when we gave that Who's Your Daddy talk, that was the first talk we gave on campus, and this guy named Justin came up to me afterwards and he said, thank you, because I was starting to doubt the Bible based on what I was being taught in class. And typically that tends to happen. And one time there was a student, and you ask him, okay, without God, how do you determine right and wrong? You know? And he said, well, if it hurts people, it's wrong. And I said, well, you must be against abortion then. He goes, no, I'm for abortion. I said, well, doesn't it hurt the baby? And I said, by your own definition, you should be against it. And he goes, you know what, you're right, I'm against it. I couldn't believe it. Normally they'll do all these mental gymnastics, but so I'm there. Yeah, it's a burden that I have to reach the students. I remember when my pastor, and you can listen to this on northlandchurch.com, there's a title on YouTube, it was called When God's Desires Become Your Desires. And I still remember that. He's talking about when, and he did that, Jesus looked at the multitude and he was moved with compassion because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And it just resonated in my spirit, St. Cloud State. I got to reach them. And I didn't know how to reach them, but I thought I'm going to try. And, you know, God does some good things there, you know, and sometimes it's not even so much our events, it's just that we get to put our posters next to their posters. You know, some of the posters that they have up, like, what did they have? Drag brunch. And we put our poster right in between that and the LGBT stuff. So it's, we want people to have other perspectives. You need to see both sides if you want to think, and it's not happening. You need to see both sides, and that's why I'm there. And sometimes students ask me, are you a professor? I said, no, I got way more freedom to speak than your professor does. If he says stuff like that, I say he's going to get fired, you know. But yeah, it's COVID kind of knocked us out of the water, so we're starting up again. But we just go where God opens the doors. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Yeah, it's kind of a sip out of a fire hose tonight. But Julie wants to answer some questions, so. All right, yes.
Have you thought about including any of Christian Smoot's findings in your presentation?
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah. Christian Smoot, he's the one that mapped the ocean floor, and he figured out that plate tectonics doesn't work. And there is a book out there that's called 20 Reasons Why Plate Tectonics Doesn't Work, and I think she cites Christian Smoot. And yeah, I should. Yeah, that's a good point, because the evidence is there that the plate tectonics doesn't work. And catastrophic plate tectonics, which is just a secular model sped up. You know, it's kind of like theistic evolution. It's just a secular model trying to with God slapped on it. And so, and that's why I really like the plate, hydroplate, because and that it does have biblical support as far as the earth being stretched out above the waters and the fountains of the great deep. And there's several verses that do have biblical support for the water being inside the earth at one point in time. And but yeah, it's an exciting theory. I encourage people to get versed on it, and you'll have a blast. You really will. It's like, wow, I can explain this and this and this and this. And then you get the boldness. Yes?
And then you find out that all scientists work for Walt Brown.
All scientists work for Walt Brown. That's right. You must be a Real Science Radio fan. Yep. Oh, yeah. rsr.org. Yeah, Fred's done a really good job, him and Doug McBurney. Yeah, all scientists do work for Walt Brown. So then they'll put this little sign on a comet that says Walt Brown was here. And yeah, it is my favorite website. And so when I'm driving out to Colorado or out to Pennsylvania, I'll be listening to Real Science Radio over and over and over again. They've got it's a really entertaining way to learn something. And I remember sitting at a red light one time, and Fred Williams is making the case that evolution is not a theory. It's barely a hypothesis. He says it's a low-grade hypothesis. And then Bob says, no, it's not a low-grade hypothesis. It's a high-grade fever-induced delusion. And that's what I did too. I was laughing at Bob. And then what else did he say? When you start with nothing plus nothing equals everything, there's no limit to the amount of mistakes you're going to make. And Bob, he was a national treasure. He really was. And he left all that stuff for us. And I encourage you guys to listen to it. You know, he's not with us anymore, but boy, did he leave a treasure trove behind. I'm just amazed at what he did with his life. And it's just incredible, all the stuff he did and everything he knew. Yes?
Your brief description of the hydroplate concept resonated with some of the exhibits I saw at Answers in Genesis Museum down in Kentucky. And so now that you're talking, it makes me wonder, have there been any conversation between you, hydroplating, and Answers in Genesis, or are they willing to entertain further concepts that some of their own exhibits would seem to support?
Yeah, there has been conversations. I know Bob Enyart, he's been to the Ark many times, and he went there and he was so mad. It's like they got the moon beat up before the flood. You know, during Creation Week, he said the moon wasn't beat up before the flood. And there is a side shore, there has been conversations. I do believe that ICR will probably be the first major one that's going to endorse it. I believe that because Randy Galuza, he invited the hydroplate people in to present to his scientists. He said, I want to know what the hydroplate people say. I don't want to know what people say about the hydroplate people. And last December, Kevin Lee was one of them, and I think he talked about that on Real Science Radio. And I have so much respect for Randy Galuza. I really do. That must not have been an easy thing for them to do because they've got their own catastrophic plate tectonic books. But he says, I want my scientists to know what theories are out there. And I just have so much respect for him. I was able to thank him personally. He spoke up in Harris, Minnesota, and I thanked him for allowing that. And he said, you know what, the hydroplate's been marginalized for far too long. And again, he is one of the best speakers I've seen and heard especially with this continuous environmental tracking. And, and for him to go out on that hydroplate limb, that must not have been easy, but thank God for it. Go where the truth, go where science leads you. And if it's making accurate predictions, it should be studied. They shouldn't be censoring it. And if you want to know why you haven't heard about it for 40 years, go into rsrs.org/answers and scroll way down to the bottom, and there's a thing that says Walt Brown controversy. And you're going to be able to see what happened and why it hasn't been taught. And it's really a sad day, what happened in the past. But that's the past. You can't change that. We just move on. And but anyhow, we got the high ground, and I think we need to advance. And let's see. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Yes. Am I familiar with primal water? Primal water. Is that? Aquifers. Oh.
Primal water exists in the earth. It's unlimited. There's a group, I think, out of California that's been drilling for it in certain places.
Yeah.
It goes beneath the aquifers. It's continually being created.
Oh, really?
So it's unlimited. Muammar Gaddafi in Libya created a river in the desert from primal water. That's one of the reasons they built it.
Oh, okay. Okay, primal water, which is below the crust of the earth, and it's unlimited.
Yes, it's constantly being renewed, and it's pure.
Constantly and pure, primal waters. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I will. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, don't everybody pound the door down to get these DVDs. There's plenty, I think. But again, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming out on a Tuesday night.